From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Every year, more adults are diagnosed with neurodivergent conditions. In fact, in 2023, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said more than 15 million adults in the U.S. had a current ADHD diagnosis, a disorder that affects attention and impulsivity. Just over half were diagnosed as an adult. Now, for autism, 1 in 45 adults have a diagnosis here in the U.S., and men are nearly 4 times more likely to be diagnosed than women. Here in Idaho, about 30,000 adults have an autism diagnosis. This is according to the National Library of Medicine. Now, even though more people are getting diagnosed, the stigma surrounding them is still high. Before a diagnosis, many say they've been told they're lazy or they needed to try harder, or they felt that they were excluded from their peers because they were different. Our very own Katie Kloppenberg has a new mental health series coming out talking about some of these issues, and she's joining us now to talk more about this. Hi, Katie.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we are happy to have you, and I love that you've created this series. So tell us why you wanted to focus on these issues in particular and do this in the format that you've decided to.
Yeah, so for this issue in specific, I've definitely had a lot of experiences with my friends being diagnosed with these conditions over the past year. And it really just started from me like wanting to do research to be able to be a better friend and a better partner, because it was my husband as well, and just be a better connection to these people and just to be able to support them. And while I was doing that research, I realized that there's a lot of issues with these people who are getting these diagnoses later in life and losing the connections to their friends and feeling more stigma around their mental health because of it. Yeah.
You know what I think is interesting, Katie, as well, is I'm thinking as you were talking about how many women in particular that I know who have gotten diagnoses in adulthood. And what I find interesting about that, especially with all of the conversation going on nationally around autism and ADHD and, oh my gosh, why are more people being diagnosed? I mean, I think it's because we know more, right?
Definitely.
So can you talk a little bit about that, though, when you've experienced, as you said, even your spouse, getting these diagnoses in adulthood, and then I would think you must have to do almost like a look back to your life being like, oh, so that's why X, Y, and Z, or I behaved this way or did this or did that.
Definitely. And for like my partner, there was almost like a sense of grieving whenever he looked back at his life, because he kind of realized afterwards that he could have done not better, but just like so much more once he finally understood like more about himself. And that's just like a lot of what people see is they look back and just be like, well, in high school, I was really, really bad at math, but maybe if I had a diagnosis of ADHD and was getting like proper treatment, however I wanted to do it, whether that's through medication or through therapy, I could have focused more. I could have been better at that. And that's kind of what I want to like change, is to be like, there's nothing wrong with being ADHD or having autism. It's just another aspect of your personality. And so learning more about yourself can really help you do better things just because you're more in touch with yourself. So if you look back and you just be like, oh, I could have done so much better, you probably couldn't have, because that's just who you are.
Well, and you make such a good point, Katie, about these diagnoses that when they happen younger, I mean, I'll take, for example, and I've spoken about this on the show because my child is very open about this. So I'm not saying anything out of confidence with him. He does have ADHD. He was diagnosed at 7 years old. He's 13 now. He's very aware of his diagnosis. It is managed, well. However, you said math, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? When you don't have the proper tools in place, being in school can be really difficult. And then I know growing up, and I think back to kids that I knew where they were seen as the problem kid, or they couldn't pay attention, they couldn't sit still, all of these things. And now we're just learning more and giving these kids more tools. But here's my question to you. If you're being diagnosed in adulthood, where are those tools?
Exactly. And that's kind of where we bring in the concept of therapy, is because they can help you find the tools to put in your toolbox for certain situations. So I did speak to a couple of Boise area therapists for this. One of them works with adults who have ADHD, and she has ADHD herself. Her name's Jessica Ayers, and we have a soundbite that we can hear from her.
There's not a lot of people that are actually educated in what ADHD really is. They believe it is just a childhood disorder. There's a lot of stigmas around it because of the use of stimulants. It was an interesting experience when I opened my practice because I felt this draw towards primarily working with ADHD adults.
So, Katie, tell us a little bit more about Jessica. As you mentioned, she has ADHD herself.
Yeah, so Jessica is a therapist. She is an adult who is also navigating ADHD. She was diagnosed, I think she said she was 25 whenever she was diagnosed because one of her children was also showing symptoms or signs of ADHD. But she does things a little differently. She does not necessarily do medication treatment as some people do, and it's totally valid. She treats things very holistically. So she focuses on diet and exercise as tools to help with ADHD. So she says, like for breakfast for someone who has ADHD, you should be getting 60 grams of protein. And that's just something
60?
Yes, it sounds like
Wow.
so much.
Yeah.
But that's like, it's a protein shake and some eggs and toast or just stuff like that, just in the morning to get your brain started. And also exercise in the morning is another thing that she just like really recommends, and it's really good for you.
So you also feature a woman named Sarah, and she talks about getting a diagnosis of autism as an adult and how she's coping. So let's hear a little bit from her real quick.
I'm saying, let's do it with purpose and intention and say, hey, I'm going to put the laundry in the dryer. And then I'm going to purposely sit down for the 45 minutes that the dryer's on and scroll TikTok. And then when the dryer buzzer goes off, I'm going to go get my laundry and do the rest of my chores.
So Katie, give us more of Sarah's story, would you?
Yeah, and so Sarah is another case of she works very closely with adults, but specifically with autism. So she does do testing. She works at Enlightened Therapy. It's her own LLC therapy. And she just helps people with autism, get tested and get the affirmation that being tested and having the official diagnosis of autism and what that provides. But after that, she helps people understand that there's nothing wrong with this situation. There's nothing wrong with you. This is just another aspect of your personality and of who you are as a person. And now we begin the work of, this is another thing that we have to be paying attention to, but it's something that you can live with and overcome in the sense of, you don't have to look back and think of all these little things back in your life of this went wrong, this is bad, this is that, whatever. Because it's not any of that. It's just something that you have and you live with. And it's just really, she works on providing the affirmation of all of that and works on providing connection and defeating the stigma that surrounds being diagnosed with autism, especially in adulthood.
I want to talk a little bit more about the stigma in a minute, but I do want to get to this college professor that you found. And you talked with her about how college students with neurodivergent conditions can struggle. So we're going to take a listen to Sarah Ann here for a second.
One of the things I really want to make sure that we talk about is that neurodiverse learners don't need separate pathways. They need an education system that welcomes and works for everyone from the start.
So Katie, how did you find Sarah Ann?
So I found Sarah Ann whenever I was just starting to do the research for this. I really, at a certain point, I was like, I really want to focus on how this affects college students because I was a person who really struggled in college with focus and ADHD. Like I had a really hard time with it. So I was looking at like, well, what are other colleges doing to help students be successful, even if they're not neurodivergent, if they are neurodivergent, if they have ADHD, autism, mental health conditions. And that's how I found Sarah Ann, because she focuses specifically on student success at Colorado State University. And we had like an initial conversation before I like sat down and formally interviewed her. And she's the nicest woman to exist on this planet, because you can tell that she just really wants to help people be successful in the school environment and even outside of it.
So, Katie, Sarah Ann talks about helping students advocate for themselves. This is critical, even if you were not neurodivergent.
Yeah, it's
But what
really hard.
it can be, right? So what advice does she have?
So a lot of what she said is baby steps whenever it comes to learning how to advocate for yourself. It is not, as we've said, it's not very easy to learn how to advocate for yourself. So it can start as something as easy as, can we hold time outside of your regular office hours? So that way I can get a little additional help outside of the classroom environment. And then it can elevate to, can we stay after class? Can we reformat this assignment a little bit so that way it's not necessarily writing a paper, it's doing a PowerPoint presentation instead. That will just help me learn better and be able to express my thoughts and ideas better. So she uses something called the Universal Design for Learning, and that was created to kind of work with all learning experiences and elevate certain areas within students' strengths and eliminate barriers in others. So it does help students kind of do their work in a way that suits them better, to the point that they're still doing the assignment, but it just makes more sense to their brains.
So, Katie, I want to go back to something you mentioned about stigma. And in particular, with folks being diagnosed older, like young adulthood, in particular, autism, I think there is such stigma around autism. And frankly, a lack of understanding within our community a lot of times about what autism looks like. I think we all have these ideas of someone who is, nonverbal, can't live on their own,
Yes.
right? Goes on and on and on. And that is why it's called autism spectrum disorder, because it is truly a spectrum.
Yeah,
Right?
you can have the
So can you talk a little bit
width
about
of
that?
it. Yeah, so as part of this, I wanted to hear from people who got their diagnosis, and a lot of them had to say that afterwards they kind of stopped meeting with their friends as much. Like their friend groups kind of shattered a little bit, and they separated and went their own ways. Some people's friends group totally stayed together, and it was absolutely okay. But it's because of just kind of the stigma that surrounds it, because there's oh, well, you have a diagnosis now, so you're weird. But it's definitely not the case. They're the same person that they were before, whether they needed more assistance on a day-to-day life. I spoke with someone who needed a little more support from their partner every day. And then there was someone who, once they got their diagnosis, it felt like all the puzzle pieces were kind of just falling into place, and it all just made more sense to them. And when we talk about stigma around it, we need to make talking about all mental health, but especially with ADHD and autism now, with how much national attention it's getting, as easy as I went to the dentist today.
Right.
Or I did.
Well,
I went to the gym. I went to the dentist. I did this totally normal thing that people do every day. And that's kind of what I'm wanting to really get across with this.
Well, and here's the thing, Katie. I think whether you know it or not, you know someone with ADHD or autism. You do.
Absolutely.
There's no way, there is no way that you cannot. And with that said, I mean, I will take even anecdotally my own experience, with my child. I didn't know much at all about ADHD. And I feel like I've become a mini expert, right? I mean, there's a lot more I can learn, but I felt like I needed to be educated as much as possible so that I knew how to navigate this with my child as he is growing and maturing. Because here's the thing too, is that the more your brain grows, right? The more mature you get, the more that frontal lobe starts to develop.
Yeah.
The diagnosis also changes, right? So
Yes.
then maybe right now, you have a child who's on medication. Well, maybe when they're a young adult, they may not need that. Maybe they will. So can you talk a little bit about that as well? As I think what people, whether if you are not the one with a diagnosis, it's kind of important to maybe educate yourself a little bit about what these neurodivergencies really are.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, I am the support person in my marriage. My husband got a diagnosis as an adult whenever he was 31. And it took a lot of reformatting in our relationship afterwards, because he started medication and he started thinking about things a little differently, and we started having more in-depth conversations about life and our relationship, and it was all very positive. But before his diagnosis, we were not able to do that. He didn't have the attention span for it, and now he's able to stay much more focused for much longer. He's a better partner. He's a better employee at his job. He was able to go back to school and get another certificate and change his career since he got diagnosed with ADHD. And these have been all very positive improvements in his life. And as a person who supports him, I'm incredibly proud of him because he did these things to improve his life. And and then, I have another friend who has autism, and that has been entirely a great experience for them because suddenly everything just made so much more sense in their brain. They were able to focus more. They were able to be more involved with their work and with their art because they do a lot of performance art. And the difference that I've seen in both my husband and my best friend is just insane because they've been able to change their lives and really be the people that they want to be for the better.
And Katie, you've really been an advocate for this. I mean, even outside of your personal experiences. And in fact, you had another series last year about mental health. So can you remind us about that one?
Yeah, so that one focused on teenagers and social media and how that can all have an impact on your mental health. And that one really came from my own personal experiences. I got a few years ago a diagnosis of major depression, but it likely spanned back to whenever I was a teenager because that's when social media was really taking off and really getting cool was like MySpace and Facebook. And I really struggled with my mental health all throughout 13 to now. So that one was really personal for me because I wanted to focus on, social media can be like a really great thing, but it's also something that you need to just be aware of whenever you're a teenager or you're a parent who has teenagers, just to keep everybody safe and protected because it can be a kind of Wild West out there.
Well, and right when your brain isn't fully developed, I mean, it's hard enough when your brain is fully developed to immerse yourself into social media and to have the understanding that most people only post the highlights of their life on social media, right?
It's like I work full time in social media now, and I still just on the weekends I delete the apps off my phone just to give myself the break and the space from it. And my friends know they can't reach me on the weekends if they try to reach me on Facebook or Instagram because I don't have it on my phone.
I love that, right? Just to, in a way, clear your brain.
Yeah, and I need to because I do work. I'm on Facebook all the time for here. I'm the one who reads all your comments.
So, Katie, before we wrap up, what do you hope people take away from this new series?
I really just hope that it sparks conversation. Conversation and connection and community is the best thing that we can do for people who have issues with their mental health or are neurodivergent in any way, shape, or form, whether they have it or they know someone who has it, whether they're married to someone who has it, whether it's your best friend who has it. It's the community and the connection aspect that I'm really just wanting to stress and bring home because the more we talk about these things, the more we get from it, the less stigmatized that it is. And we're all better people for that.
And Katie, where can folks watch the videos in the new series? Because this, there really is kind of only one place, right?
Yeah, so we launched these only on Instagram. It is a special social media only series. They are videos, and they're made to be really kind of just like quick hits of it, but really in-depth storytelling with people that matter and have really great opinions. So you can watch them on Instagram. They will be published on our website as well, but just a little later. So the place to watch them all in one place in one go right now is on Instagram.
And people just follow our Instagram handle.
You can just follow us, Boise State Public Radio.
All right. Katie, I love that you're doing this. Thanks for taking time to talk to us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We've been speaking with our very own Katie Kloppenberg about her new mental health series on autism and ADHD. Now, you can watch those, as we said, on Instagram, but we'll also put links to the series on our website, boisestatepublicradio.org. You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudet.